Over the years, I've spent countless hours researching crypto projects, interviewing founders, investigating scams, studying tokenization, and trying to understand how technology can change the world. But recently, I came across a story that stopped me in my tracks. A story involving malaria, a disease that many people outside Africa hear about occasionally, but rarely think about. This is a disease that continues to destroy families every single day in Africa. And it all started when I began researching a doctor by the name of Dr. Emmanuel Emenike. Originally from Nigeria and now based in California, Dr. Emenike is not just another physician. What caught my attention was his passion, the way he talks about solving problems, the way he talks about innovation, and most importantly, his belief that some of humanity's biggest challenges can still be solved if enough people came together around a common purpose. As I dug deeper into his work, I discovered something called the Malaria Project. And the more I learned, the more questions I had. Because this wasn't your typical charity campaign. This wasn't another organization simply publishing reports and statistics. This was a group of people talking about innovation, a group of people talking about infrastructure, talking about healthcare, talking about community empowerment, talking about education, talking about genetics, talking about blockchain technology, and then long-term solutions. Naturally, I wanted to know more, and I started investigating. And what I found was fascinating. It all began with unusual alliance. So, back in October on 19th in 2025, Dr. Emmanuel Emenike joined forces with a guy called Ryan Carter. And Ryan Carter is the founder of Unity Token. So together with DSGN, which stands for Diaspora Solutions Group of Nigeria, they together launched what became known as the Malaria Project. Now, at first glance, this partnership seems unusual. Okay, on this side you have a physician, then you have a humanitarian initiative, and then now you have a blockchain ecosystem, and you have now a diaspora organization, all coming together around one mission: to help fight malaria in Nigeria and hopefully contribute towards a future where malaria is no longer devastating communities across the country. When I first read about this partnership, I asked myself a simple question, like, why of all diseases would they choose to eradicate malaria? So, out of all challenges facing Africa today, why focus so heavily on this disease? The answer became very clear the deeper I looked into it. Because this is a crisis that most of the world never sees. I want you to agree with me. You see, many people living outside Africa, malaria is often just another disease mentioned in a health report. But I want to tell you that millions of African families, malaria is a daily reality. It is a constant threat. It affects children, it affects pregnant mothers, it affects entire communities. And despite decades of efforts around the world, malaria continues to take lives every single year. What struck me most during my research was the repeated focus on mothers and children. So every report, every conversation, every statistic, the same groups kept appearing: children, mothers, families. And that's when I realized that this story wasn't really about technology. It wasn't even primarily about healthcare. But at its core, the story is about people themselves. People trying to break a cycle that existed for generations. So speaking with Dr. Emmanuel Mnike, as I continued my investigation, I reached out to Dr. Emmanuel to learn more about all this and what is happening, because I wanted to understand exactly what they were building, what their vision was, and how they intended to tackle challenges as enormous as malaria. What I discovered, it was a collaboration involving doctors, a collaboration involving researchers and health specialists and innovators. The mission is simple to explain, but it is incredibly ambitious: to eradicate malaria. Not to reduce it, not to manage it, but to eradicate it out of the communities. And according to Dr. Mnike, understanding the malaria cycle is critical. The disease is transmitted through infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. So when these mosquitoes bite humans, the malaria parasite enters the body and begins its cycle of infection. So the project's objective is to interrupt that cycle. So one of the approaches being explored involves advanced genetic research. So Dr. Mnike explained that researchers are working on breeding mosquitoes that are incapable of carrying malaria, or the parasite that causes malaria. So in simple terms, mosquitoes that cannot spread the disease. So the project is also exploring the use of precision drone technology to release these modified mosquitoes into high burden regions. Drive these modified mosquitoes in a drone, then they release them into the environment, and then those mosquitoes get in contact with these wild mosquitoes. Now, not laboratory ones. The laboratory ones are released into these wild mosquitoes, so they start producing mosquitoes that cannot infect malaria anymore. So the idea here, in my own observation, it is to target areas where malaria transmission is most severe, and then gradually reduce the ability of local mosquito populations to carry this disease. But here is something really very important. The project does not stop here on just releasing these advanced mosquitoes into the local ones, because malaria isn't just a mosquito problem, but malaria is a healthcare problem. It is an infrastructure problem and also a community problem. That means that communities must also be involved. People People must understand what is happening. Schools must be involved. Faith groups must be involved. Local leaders must be involved. So the project aims to remain active on the ground through education programs. It is not a dump mosquitoes, genetically improved mosquitoes through the drone and then let it be. No, but it is to carry on educational programs, to carry on monitoring programs, community engagements, and ongoing health initiatives, help here and there. And that's where blockchain technology enters the picture. This is where the blockchain meets the humanitarian action. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know blockchain is usually associated with finance, and I've been talking about this like forever. People think about Bitcoin. When they think about crypto trading, they think about token prices, right? But during my research, I started looking at blockchain from a different angle. What if blockchain could help support these kind of humanitarian projects? What if technology could help create transparency around healthcare initiatives? What if people around the world could support humanitarian causes directly through blockchain systems? This is where Unity token comes into the picture. So according to the project's vision, blockchain technology can be used to improve transparency, to track activities, to monitor outcomes, and also provide verifiable records of project's operations. So everything is on the blockchain. Every transaction can potentially be recorded on a public blockchain. Every movement can potentially be tracked. Every activity can potentially become more transparent. For supporters, that means a greater visibility. For communities, that means greater accountability. And for the project leaders, it creates an opportunity to build trust through this kind of transparency. So whether blockchain becomes a major component of future humanitarian initiatives, this remains to be seen. But certainly, an interesting idea is happening. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is worth watching. I've been looking at various statistics that really shocked me. I want to talk about numbers right now, because honestly, this is the part that hit me the hardest. Nigeria carries the largest malaria burden in the whole world. Nigeria, it carries the largest malaria burden in the world. Think about that for a moment. The largest malaria burden on the planet. So I've been looking at this, and according to the malaria data, Nigeria accounts for more than 25% of all malaria cases globally. This is approximately to 30% of malaria deaths worldwide. 30%, just a single country like this. One country. I think you see why Nigeria is a focus for this initiative. 30% of malaria deaths globally, they're from Nigeria. So nearly 1/3 of global malaria deaths. When I first read that, I stopped and read it again. I was like, okay, wow. Like, okay. Because it's difficult to comprehend. Then I discovered that approximately 97% of Nigeria's population, it lives in areas where malaria remains a risk. 97% of the people, they live in areas where malaria is severe there. That means that almost every family faces a possibility of this infection, a possibility of an infection, or a possibility of a death from malaria. Every family. This is huge, and I think they need a savior. And if this malaria initiative project goes through and it is positive, I think people are going to be saved. Lives of people are going to be saved. So the country is estimated to record around 68 million malaria cases every year. 60 million people, at least, they get this infection every year. They are bedridden because of malaria. And by the way, did you know that if you get an infection of malaria, at least 2 weeks of work, 2 weeks of everything, just trying to cure from this disease. And more than 1,800,000 deaths happen annually in Nigeria. 1,800,000 people die of malaria. This is really scary. Out of 68 million cases, 1,800,000 people die. This is really bad. This is bad. This is every year. Those are not just statistics. Those are people. Those are families. Those are children. Those are mothers. Those are fathers. These are our communities. And according to the Global Health Organization, children under 5 remain more vulnerable. Children are dying. Many of their lives being lost are children who could be in school, children who could be playing football, children who could be doing music, children who should be dreaming about their future. But instead, many families are fighting a disease that has existed for generations. And that is exactly why projects like this exist. Because for the people living with this reality every day, malaria is not a statistic. Malaria is now personal. This story matters. And as I continue to research and read, I began to realize something. That this story, this project is bigger than malaria. It is bigger than blockchain. It is bigger than technology. It is really about whether innovation can be used to solve real human problems. Can doctors, can scientists, can technologists, can community leaders and organizations work together to create this kind of a meaningful change? Can we see it happen? Can healthcare and technology complement one another? Can transparency improve trust? Can communities become active participants rather than passive recipients? These are the important questions here. And while nobody can guarantee success of this project, I believe that the willingness to try also matters. Because doing nothing certainly won't solve the problem. But trying on it and bringing it on board and execute it is the only way forward. After spending time researching about the malaria project, And speaking with Dr. Emmanuel, one thing is completely very clear to me, that this is not simply a healthcare story, but this is a human story. It's a story about people trying to solve one of the Africa's most persistent challenges through innovation, through collaboration, through long-term thinking. Millions of malaria cases continue to occur every year. Thousands of people continue to lose their loved ones. Children remain amongst the most vulnerable victims. Yet, despite these challenges, there are still people willing to dedicate their lives to find solutions. Isn't that amazing? So whether through healthcare innovation, through genetic research, community education, blockchain transparency, or public health infrastructure, I think the Malaria project is tempting something ambitious. It is tempting something ambitious. And as a journalist, I believe stories like this deserve attention, because they remind us that technology is at its best when it improves lives. I think the coming years will ultimately determine the success of these efforts. But I think one thing is certain: the fight against malaria is far from over. And this is definitely a story that I will continue following up closely and giving you regular updates on what is happening on ground. I would want to see this happen. Thank you for listening to the Crypto Investor Podcast. My name is Daniel Reinhardt, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much. May God bless you. Bye.